Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have Pichon Duplan here with me today. He is a management consultant and the founder of SportUp. Pichon, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. So set the scene for us. Bring it back to the beginning. Where you grew up, your family situation, what you were like as a kid, things like that.
Yeah, I can go all the way back. So I was born in LA, Los Angeles, California. Actually, my family, most of my family is from Ghana in West Africa, and so I was born in LA, but shortly after, 3 years in, moved back to Ghana with my family, and so I have my parents, obviously, and then I have one older brother, and I would say we're a pretty close family. Always did stuff together. Always had open conversations while we were at home. And so I grew up in Ghana in a very close family. Stayed in Ghana. Went to primary and part of high school in Ghana. And then that's when I made the trip over to the States, um, or back to the States, for my junior and senior year of high school, and then on to Babson College, and then on to my full time career as well.
So dive into that a little bit. I mean, most listeners aren't going to have that experience of even probably visiting Ghana, right?
Yep.
So, what was that like? And you know, just I guess, what do you remember from your time there?
Yeah, a lot. I remember a lot. I've always believed and said Ghana has formed a lot of my values, and who I am today, including what my parents taught me, and my brother growing up. So Ghana is known for its hospitality, and it's a very welcoming country. Everyone's so friendly, so nice, so supportive. There's a keen sense of entrepreneurship in Ghana. There are a lot of folks, as we were growing up, that were either starting their own business, but even treating corporate businesses as their own, right? And so they had that entrepreneurial feel, and you always get that, in Ghana. I would say, kind of the school system growing up, um, it was more so, this is what you were taught, and then on, your final exams and so forth, you're tested on what you were taught, the notes you were taking in class, and so forth. So I would say, fun fact, that was a transition for me, coming from Ghana into school in the States, and on to school in the States, because it was more so, um, in the States, you're taught something, and then on the final exam, you have to apply what you're taught. So I always give this example. You know, you get taught on a specific topic. On the final exam, you get asked a question. Well, you're stranded on an island. You have X, Y, Z to take, and what would you take and why, right? To apply the knowledge that you learned, onto onto the final exam, and be able to answer the question that way. In Ghana, it was more clean cut, more straightforward in terms of, this is what you were taught, X, Y, Z. And then, on the final exam, it's, what is the definition of X, Y, Z? What are the advantages, disadvantages of X, Y, Z, and so forth, right? And so this was way back when. And I'm sure the education system has evolved, since then, or I know the education system has evolved since then in terms of being more applicable. Um, and so that was just a huge, what I huge transition, education wise, going from Ghana into high school, in the States. All,
Curious,
all, all fun memories, all
yeah,
fun
yeah.
memories.
Curious about the transitions, right? At three, like, were you confused by, like, because I mean, it's not only a different country, but you speak a
Yeah,
different language. The people, in terms of color of their skin, is a whole different, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
different look. And then when you came back, I mean, those transitions were how tough were they? I mean, I don't even know if you
Yeah,
remember.
honestly, I don't remember a thing when I was three, right?
Yeah.
I have like flashes and pictures, when I don't remember much. As we were growing up, though, my parents did a great job for my brother and I in terms of, you know, going to the States for vacation, maybe summer vacation. And I have, aunts, I had aunts and uncles living in the States as well. So we were privileged, or, we had the privilege of taking summer vacations to the States, and being able to transition, from Ghana into the States, back going to school in Ghana, for a period of time, going to the States, and so forth. So, I mean, the transition, from the States coming back to Ghana, I would say is mere, for what my folks have told me, it was merely an accent change for me.
Yeah.
And then just growing up, it was more so my values are being formed by, what we're learning at home, what we're learning at school, and then taking summer vacation, in the States, coming back, going through school. And the transition was really when I was moving back to the States, which was when I was about 16. Um, and moving into, one type of educational system into the next. I actually, when I was going to the States, I was going to a boarding school. So I was picture this, I was in high school at the time, just ending my, what's equivalent as my year, right, in high school. And so coming to the coming to the States, I was coming to a boarding school. I was not only coming to a boarding school, but I was going to a boarding school in New Hampshire where I knew no one, right? I think I had one distant uncle and aunt. They're about an hour and a half away from my boarding school, right? And so I was going into a boarding school in an area that I'm unfamiliar with as well. So that was a transition. Plus, it was in New Hampshire, so it's freezing. So that's a change there. In addition to the educational system, in terms of, you're taught one thing and then you have to apply it, to the next. And
Ta-
so that was really my main transition there.
Talk about friends, right? You made a lot of friends in Ghana, and
Yeah.
then suddenly you're moving to a different country. Have you been like? Was that tough? Have you been able to stay in touch with I mean, a lot of people don't stay in touch with their high school friends in general, but um, and then making new friends here. How was that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a cool and interesting process, I would say. So I did keep in touch with my friends from Ghana, and we're very close friends till this day, right? And so they were going through their boarding school. So in Ghana, for high school, you go through boarding school, right? And that's kind of the norm.
Yeah.
And they were going through their boarding school experiences. I was going through my boarding school experiences as well, in the States. And so we kept in touch, through phone conversations. There wasn't really FaceTime. I think Skype was just starting then, I think, and was becoming a thing. It was mainly phone calls just to kind of keep in touch. And then I've always, and maybe I thank my folks for this. I was always open as a kid in terms of, meeting new people, meeting new friends, building those relationships there. So it was a little easier for me coming into the States to make new friends. I was heavily into sports as well, basketball, and then I was taking up American football when I came here. And so through that, I think sports had a a, a, a big a big advantage for me, in making new friends quickly and fast, because that team environment really allowed me to, build some camaraderie with some folks as well coming in. I was the new kid on the block,
Yeah.
coming in my junior year, obviously, right? And so you have to kind of make friends fast, and so that really helped me a lot, in terms of making friends. And then, I still had kind of my friends in Ghana that I kept in touch with, my friends in high school, and then at some point, as we went along, my world started to kind of merge together, and that till this day I've always been intrigued by that, because the same thing happened in college. Same thing happened when I, started work full time. And then those worlds kept coming together, which was a very interesting thing, right?
Yeah.
Having friends from Ghana, having friends from here, my friends from Ghana, some of them came over to the States, they made new friends. And then you have all these worlds coming together, which is a very, very interesting concept. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Especially given what you've done recently and what you're doing now.
mm,
And you talked a little bit about it, but you know, do you remember entrepreneurship being brought up as a kid, or where did that come later in life, in college, or when did that
yeah,
come to your thoughts?
yeah. So I honestly thought I didn't. So the word entrepreneurship wasn't really a thing, going through, I would say almost up to high school, right? It almost wasn't a thing for me in terms of, I mean, I was seeing it, but the term entrepreneurship wasn't really a thing up until I went to Babson College, right? And Babson College, for those that don't know, they're one of the top schools for entrepreneurship, right? And really, right when I got on campus at Babson, um, that's when entrepreneurship was really starting to end for me, right? And so I knew the word entrepreneurship, and I always thought about it as, oh, starting your own business, right? Until I went to Babson, and the word was starting to be defined right from freshman year, right? And the cool thing about it is at Babson, um, right from freshman year, you have the opportunity to, start your own business with a group. There's an actual course where the class is divided into different groups. Within your groups, you start your own business, you run your own business, sell your product or your service with the intention of making a profit, and then those profits are, distributed to a nonprofit at the end of the day, right? And so you go through all the aches and pains and the successes of starting your own business at Babson, right? And that's when I really started to be in sync with the term entrepreneurship, where it's more than just starting your own business, but it's a mindset, right? It's a way of life. It's how you go about your daily and ongoing business, right? And that's really when entrepreneurship began to become a thing for me. And then I started to reflect back in terms of what my parents were doing with work, what I had seen around my surroundings in Ghana with other people starting their own business, or even what I was seeing around at Babson with folks starting their own business, or even going into the corporate world, but treating their careers as they were an entrepreneur within the career. And I think that's where the whole entrepreneur term came from, right? In
Mm.
terms of being owning your own career, owning your own career within the corporate world. So I think it was Babson that was kind of the cutting point for me, or the threshold that I really now began to know what entrepreneurship really meant. Um, and that's what kind of spurred a lot of the things that I've done and continue to do today.
Yeah. We didn't talk about this, but I guess before, in your senior year of high school,
Mm,
what drew you to Babson? Were you close to choosing any other colleges?
yeah. Um, so with Babson, so when I was in high school, and it's funny though, because I had this career path kind of mapped out in my head, from an early age. I went from wanting to play professional sports when I was growing up
Yeah.
to now I wanted to become a doctor. Then I switched to wanted to become an engineer. Then I was like, you know what? I like math. Science is okay. I still like it, but I like math. I want to become a businessman. I had these terms in my head, and then I was really like, you know what? Any of these things, the foundation of it has to be you have to be business oriented and be able to understand business no matter what industry you're going in. Right? And so that's when I kind of made up my mind that I did want to go into an institution that would prepare me to have that business mind, right? So did my research. Babson obviously was top of the list. There were other schools like Bryant University, Bentley, that were on the list. And then obviously for football, I had to put some other colleges on the list as well because I also wanted to explore that route as well. So really thinking, hey, how can I set a good base for myself in terms of being business minded? And then, my mindset at the time was once I have that, I can pretty much, you know, have multiple paths open up for me, right? Because that was one thing growing up, right? That my brother and I, as we were growing up in Ghana, we were always removed, from our folks was if you set your mind on anything, you can do anything, right? Um, you just have to have a vision, you have to have a plan, but you can basically do anything you want in this world, right? And so that was the mindset going in. Like I was thinking ahead and trying to say, okay, let me track back to where I am now and see what do I need right now to build a foundation and a base for me to be successful in the future. In my mind, seems weird at the time, in my team I'm thinking about, but I don't know what came about me, but this was something that I was deeply passionate about. And so that's what drove the decision, to apply to Babson and so forth, and ultimately got in. And the rest was history.
Yeah. As you look back, now that you've now started three organizations post grad,
Mm-hmm.
you know, regardless of where our listener is, whether they're, you know, in college, post grad, whatever, what were some of the steps or what were some of the things you did right in turn? I mean, even if it's as practical as like, you know, I learned how to form a nonprofit or like what do you think people should take advantage of with their undergraduate education to put them in a position that you were in to start three different organizations post grad?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is you don't have to wait for the perfect time. Being an undergrad in college, it gives you the best opportunity you have in your life to explore different things, regardless of if you're going to be successful or you're going to fail, right? You have the time to do that. Really, like it may not seem that way because you have full course schedule, you have extracurricular activities, all that, but you really have the time to really explore, try new and different things. And so that was really the approach I took was, hey, if you have something in mind, start it. Even if you don't know how to start, do a little bit of research. For me, it was, for a nonprofit, let's find out what it takes. Came across the term 501c3, researched what does that actually mean, right? How do you go about getting that status? You have to get that status at the state level. You also have to get that status at the federal level, right? You need a vision for your company, your products, and you need to define your products and services. So I was going through all these things, and mind you, the other thing too is you don't have to go at it alone, right? So for instance, my nonprofit, I co-founded it with two of my closest friends that I grew up with, by the way, from Ghana as well. And we started this together. So you don't have to go at it alone. One, I would say just start it and begin and evolve as you go. Two is you're not alone at anything that you're doing, whether you're co-founding something or starting it on your own. You still have your network and the network of the people within your network to help you out along the way as well, right? Even at the undergrad level, everyone thinks, oh, I have to, build a network. Everybody pretty much already has a network just based off of friends and family, right? And then as you grow, that evolves. Um, but that was one of the things that I took advantage of was starting, and then as I evolve, I utilize my network, my friends also. We put together our networks, and then answered questions along the way until we got to a point where we know the business of starting a nonprofit. We know the business of running the programs and so forth, and then we just kind of went off. But I think we had the most time during undergrad than we would ever have right now to to start something like that, right? And that's the best time to do it because you can fail, you can succeed, you can fail 3 more times and then succeed, you're still young enough and you still have the platform in the future to do many more things to come.
I tell college students all the time that you have time. Time is what you have. You know, when you get to the working professional world, you're working, 10 hours a day. In college, you might have like three classes, which is like 3 hours of your day. I mean, it's a huge difference in time.
Exactly. Exactly. Huge difference. You may have these overnighters that you do while you're writing your paper and all that good stuff. But I mean, you really have those pockets that you can take advantage of. And then obviously, some of it takes time management and a little bit of sacrifice on the weekends, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't every weekend that I was also going out, hanging out with friends. But then there were some Sundays, some Saturdays, some Fridays that I was just lay low a little bit and
Mhm.
work on things that I could progress. Given the time, if I had a busy schedule during the week, Fridays and Saturdays were my go-tos
Yeah.
till this day, actually.
Yeah. 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 So I have it here. You started iStandAbove organization as a sophomore in college.
Yeah, so it's really myself, two of my closest friends, and so Peter Yobo and Abdul Halim Musa as well. So the two of my close friends from Ghana, and we were in our sophomore year in college, and basically we came up with an idea based on the difference in the educational system at the time between Ghana and the States. And basically it went back to this whole notion of when you come to the States and you're going through and learning through a topic, the final exam is how well can you apply your knowledge from what you learned during the semester, right? And part of the way we were thinking about it was how can we empower students, high school and college students in Ghana, so they could have that mindset early on in their educational careers, because that's really what breeds and builds upon leaders in our community. We were noticing a trend, and we wanted to excuse me, we wanted to really have a nonprofit that really tackles that. So we co-founded an organization called iStandAbove, and basically what was run leadership camps focused on leadership, creativity, and teamwork. Those were things that we thought were the key principles to becoming a leader. And when we say leadership, it's more so taking initiative, right, on different things and starting things. When we say creativity, it's more so being able to think outside the box, right? There's always a solution for something. When we say teamwork, is having that ability to not only work by yourself, but also to work within teams, right? Knowing very well that you may need to sit back sometimes and you may need to take ownership sometimes as well. Those were principles that we were beginning to educate ourselves on as we got older and wanted to basically give back through iStandAbove, so others that were going through similar paths or not could also have those values as well. So with iStandAbove, we basically formed iStandAbove to have these leadership camps focus on these three things through activities and through doing, for high school students first. That's where we started. We had these 3-day boot camps and then activities throughout the year, to be able to teach that. And it's still running to this day. And it's something that we're very very proud of, to have started this
Yeah.
back then.
You mentioned three co-founders. Can you talk about the start of the company? I mean, was it one of you just got on the just thought of it and started asking your friends what they thought, and or like
Yeah,
what was it about the three of you that you guys decided?
yeah. So between the three of us, we always talk about a whole lot of stuff, and part of that is also talking into the future as well. And so it really started, and Peter Yobo, who's part of the trio, I would say, he always was coming up with different ideas. And I would say before iStandAbove started, we must have talked through about 15 different ideas before this. Um, and we all talked about it and said, okay, yeah, it's a great idea. Let's do this, let's do that. Maybe not, stuff like that. Once he brought up this idea of iStandAbove, it just clicked for the three of us in terms of this is it, right? This is something that if we move forward with, we could create such tremendous impact on students, hands down. And so we just it just clicked for us in terms of here is the idea. Now the only question was how do we execute, right? And between all of us, right? So Peter always came up with always came up with these ideas. I was known for execution. Um, Ali was known for bringing us together because we always went into the extremes in terms of, for me, for execution, with the ideas. Halim was kind of our glue sticking us together so we don't go off the rails,
Yeah.
while we're putting together. So it just clicked, and we always did things together, in Ghana, as well. So this was something that we just said, hey, let's let's start, see where it goes, and then we just started to put in the work. We didn't wait for it to be perfect. We evolved along the way, and then that was that.
What was how did you get over the fear of starting? Because I think a lot of people,
Yeah.
they fear starting. I think mostly because they think people will make fun of them if it's a failure, or I mean, I'm not really sure, but especially at that age, as a sophomore, you're like 19 maybe, like it's I just, were you guys just naive and weren't afraid, or like what how's that process?
Yeah. We always were hesitant in terms of, what if we failed, and so forth. But then, as we were thinking about it, honestly, what we thought of was, what's the worst that can happen? We put together a program, we put together an event, maybe one or two kids show up, and that's that. But what always came back to us for us to overcome was, it only takes one individual for us to create change. And so we said, let's do what we're talking about doing. Let's execute it. Let's move forward with it. Even if we get one student, that's one more student that we would have had, if we hadn't even done anything. So that was kind of our mindset, and we just focused on that, as opposed to, what would others think. I mean, we did get questions of, how can you guys do this with your school? You should really be focused on school and all that stuff. And we're like, well, this is also part of our educational experience, right?
Yeah.
That's where we took, focused on our vision, focused on what we set out to do, and focused on the uniqueness that we brought to the table based on our unique experiences, whether it was from the Ghana educational system, the US educational system, our ability to make new friends, our contacts, all that stuff. And we just said, let's start it, regardless of if we fail. That, I mean, everyone is kind of different in terms of how you overcome that fear. For us, it was just being laser focused on our mission and our vision. Even if we had one person, that was still one person that we would impact. And that's what kind of set us off, and that's what kept us going. And so we really didn't think about the failure aspect. We were just so focused on, how do we make this successful. And once we had something that we were able to promote, we went above and beyond promoting it, went to, like, talk to different schools, all that stuff, and really tried to make the first real program as successful as possible, because we knew once people saw the success of one program, the first program, it would set the stage for us. And that was, we were so busy on focused on that, we didn't really even sit down to think, what if. We just kept going.
That's awesome. I think, and maybe you can bring your other experiences as well. There's a huge debate on founding organizations with friends or with family, right? Because you have your personal relationship, and then there's the
Yeah,
the business visions and stuff like that, and it can get tense, right? Because you love the person, but you might
yeah.
disagree business wise where we should go. Did you guys experience any of that? Was there, like, how did you manage the personal and the nonprofit visions?
There's always riffraff that goes with that. And with us, it was no different. We we went in as friends. We came out as friends also, thankfully. But yeah, there was riffraff, in between. Obviously, we didn't always be on everything, right? And there were times where we didn't want anything to do with each other just because we definitely disagreed on a couple of different topics. What brought us back was just reminding us that we're all in this for a greater, right? We're all in this for the betterment of other people, and it's not just the individuals. That was one thing. The second thing was we reminded ourselves that we are at the end of the day are beyond just business partners. We're friends, right? Our families know each other. Our families go way back. And so between those two things, we had to constantly remind ourselves that, hey, I stand above as a business. We're going to disagree. At the end of the day, we're going to be friends. We're going to be brothers. Let's move forward beyond those. It was harder at times,
Yeah.
but there's always going to be, like, if you start things with your friends, family, there's always going to be disagreements, and so you have to go in. And that was something that we had to learn pretty quickly because no one told us that as well, right? We sort of figured it out as we went along, but we had to constantly remind ourselves, and also that helped going into my next my next venture because also co-founded with a friend of
Yeah. Yeah.
mine as well. Um, and so we just have to constantly remind ourselves. But yeah, there's always going to be riffraff, but you have to set those expectations right at the beginning. If you are going into something with a friend, that there's the business aspect, which you're going to disagree on some things, but then you also have your friendship that you need to kind of separate, from the business in order to make it work.
Yeah. And then, so did you start your football journey before Fast Forward, or was it?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So football was kind of a thing that came in and created some riffraff along the journey as well as well. Yeah, football was before Fast Forward. So right when, just to kind of align everything, iStandAbove was kind of my sophomore into junior year of college, right? And so that was off the ground and running. Then I graduated. So just bear in mind, so Babson, I played football in high school. Okay, played football my junior and senior year of high school. Didn't get a chance to play in college because Babson doesn't have a football team. But I was always intrigued, in terms of the sport and being able to play. I had a couple of schools, want me to come in. I missed kind of the whole scholarship run, and recruiting season. But I had a couple colleges wanted me to come and try out, right when I came on campus. Unfortunately, I went the Babson route, so they don't have a football team. But I was always intrigued by that notion of, obviously these coaches saw my high school tape and they think I'm good enough to at least, make the team. So I went through Babson just having this at the back of my mind. And then once I graduated, I started full time, doing management consulting. I started to think about it deeply in terms of I'm starting to notice that maybe there is a way to try out professionally without having to go through the whole college experience, which I began to find out how uphill that was. But then I went back to what I always went back to as a kid was, if I put my mind to anything, I could probably get it done some way somehow. Um, and so I was privileged enough to privileged us to meet a couple individuals, Tyrone Pruitt and Matt King. And at the time, so Matt King and Tyrone Pruitt, they had originally, they played in college. They had some playing time in the NFL, and then also in the CFL, the Canadian Football League as well. And at the time that I had the conversation with them, they were also training, other athletes, kind of making that transition from college to the pros as well. So I just figured, let me have a conversation. I met Tyrone actually through, a friend of mine at work,
Wow.
because they both went to Boston College together, and so we had the conversation, and my whole goal was to just ask the question: Has there been anyone that has made the transition into the pros without having to go through college? And you know, Tyrone said to me, "Well, you look the part, so we just need to train. We just need to train you and make sure you have the tangibles and all that stuff. And there, tryouts that happen for the NFL and the CFL. I mean, he was straight up with me that it was a long shot, but it's possible. You know what I mean? And the words "it's possible" is all I needed to hear, right? And so from then, I started to train with Tyrone, in anticipation, because there was always a season of tryouts for the NFL and CFL. There was always a season of tryouts, so I would just train, while I was working full time. There were always these days that I would train right after work. I would make sure to communicate with my teams that I have to, leave and pick up the work later on. But I would always block probably about 2 to 3 hours of my time in the evenings to go over and train. Most of my Saturdays were training as well, with Tyrone, and that was how it started, actually. So I would start training, and then once a tryout comes up, you sign up, you go do your thing, and then it's back to training. And wait, and based on your tryout performance, you may or may not get called up for minicamp coming up as well, right? So that was kind of the football journey. And there were times where, because in order to get to the facility where I was training, it was probably an hour away. So that's why I kind of made that gap. So it's an hour there, train for about an hour and a half, and then you have an hour back, and then my full time job as well. But it was an interesting experience. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Had an opportunity to meet different people. Had an opportunity to strengthen my mentality as well, because you're going into all these tryouts. And for me, I always went into the tryouts like, okay, I'm going up against all these guys that, you look into their eyes and you line up against them, and you can see the fire in their eyes, and you have to match that or even do better than that, right? Because everyone is vying for, one, two, maybe three positions, right? Because each tryout, honestly, they're only looking for the top three guys. And also based on the position that you're playing, based on the position openings that they have on the team. So just that challenge alone was a great learning experience for me. Just in terms of physically and mentally, to be able to know how far I can take my mind and my body. Um, and that was something that I wouldn't trade for the world, right? And then as I was going through that experience as well, I was going through these tryouts, and it was told to me that, hey, you have the intangibles. You have the speed, you have the size, you have the power, all that stuff. You have the agility, but we haven't seen any game tape. And so that was a step that I needed to take. And that's when I started to look into kind of semi-professional leagues, to get some game tape. And so, found a Massachusetts team as well, who had like former players that made it into like a training camp, former players that played in Europe, all that stuff, and this was kind of their way of still being attached to the game and playing. And so went down the semi-pro route, played that for a year, still tried out, still was training, um, and yeah, and then I was still trying out. There were a couple instances where that was I had conversations with teams where it was like, all right, you have a great deal. However, it was always the game tape, right? It was always semi-pro is good, but it's an array of different talents. Can you go into maybe the Arena Football League and stuff like that, right? That was when at that point I was getting too old for
Yeah.
for the game as well, and had to kind of switch gears for a second. But it was a very interesting and fulfilling experience that I went through. Wouldn't change it for anything as well.
How was your mental health during that time? Because you're working full time, you're going after this dream, and it's physically and mentally taxing, and then just time wise, it takes up time. How was your mental health during that time period?
Um, it was taxing.
Yeah.
It was taxing for sure. Mentally, I was drained, so I had to find pockets of time where I just needed to kind of step back from it all and just kind of relax, take a half a day just to myself and just kind of reset. Right, Sundays were always that day for me. And honestly, like it's a lot in terms of you're working full time during the week. You're also training a lot of hours during the week. Saturdays were basically football days for me. um,
Yeah.
and but then you also have you have your friends that you need to hang out with and blah blah blah, right? And you always, and this is where kind of I learned how big support is. Friends and family, because and so this was one of the times where support really, really comes into play because mentally you're taxed, at the work level, sport level, and I really tuned in and really had some support from friends and family, just making sure that I was in the right frame of mind, and I was focused on the goals ahead, right? I always had, some check-in calls with friends and family, just asking how I was doing. But then also, you also need that you can kind of take a step back and be able to just reset, right? That was my Sundays. Was how do I reset? How do I how do I reset? How do I get ready for the week ahead? And I just took it week by week, really, because if I was to look at it at a whole things, I probably wouldn't be in the right
Yeah.
headspace there, right? And so that was, I mean, it was taking time for yourself, and then two, making sure that you have the right support system around you, so you can, express some of your emotions, express some of your feelings, and that was what helped me through that time because it was taxing, but it was having those two things available that really kept me going, and gave me the energy from week.
Yeah, no, I think that's an awesome story because I always get this question of, why should I go after my dreams? And, I think, just from your story alone, first, you'll never have regret of not trying. You tried, you gave it your all. Second, you know, there is no failure in terms of like you met a lot of people that you probably otherwise would not have met. And that's a cool part. And third, you learned a lot about yourself in terms of how much you can push yourself mentally, physically, all I mean, and that's probably helped you in just being like, wow, like I'm so amazed at myself and being able to do all these things. So
For sure.
no, that's an awesome story.
Thank you.
Yeah. So and then shortly after that, you started Fast Forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the tryout period was probably a 4-year span, where I was Went through different seasons of trying out, and then I just got too old. And at the time, I was still working full time, and a friend of mine, Tucker Matheson, as well. Tucker Matheson, told me about, and we were having a conversation about different emails and notes you get from college students, just asking how to break into the consulting industry. Okay. And we were talking about this for a while, and we just said, sort of similar to how we just how Peter and Halim and I started iStandAbove. Same situation with Tucker and myself. We started having these conversations, and we're like, we had something big we did that told college students how to break into the industries that they want to. And then we're like, what if we wrote a book? And we're like, okay, how easy can that be? Must be pretty easy. This was not the case at all that we found out. But we said, let's just start putting our thoughts together. And let's just write a book together. You have your experiences that you normally tell college students. He had his experiences that he, like, the advice that he gives to college students. Let's just combine that, put that together, and let's see what the process is to publish a book. But let's just actually have the content and put it together. And we're like, yeah, that's fine. Let's do it. So we literally that day opened up a Google Word document, and we started laying out different chapters for the book, or different concepts that we normally do. And we divided and conquered, say, hey, let Pichon, you focus on this, Tucker, you focus on this, and let's just start writing, putting pen to paper, right? And so as we started to jot down these ideas, that's when we started to now evolve. And so we literally, and I'll tell you a quick story, we literally wrote content and thought we were ready with a book in 3 months. Okay.
Yeah.
And we took this content, and it took 3 months because we were also figuring out if we wanted to self-publish or go through like a policy, and we conversations, and ultimately we decided to go the self-publishing route, and we found an avenue through Amazon to be able to do that. And so we were like, hey, 3 months, this was easy. How easy can it be? Wrote a book in 3 months, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we went to a mentor of ours, and we gave him the book. We talked about the idea. He asked us one question, which stumped us completely, which was, what is your book's differentiator amongst the other books the thousands of books that are out there? So we answered the question, but we didn't really answer the question, right? We kept answering the was like, yeah, that's great, but how is your book actually different from all the thousands of books out there? And we're like, actually, there is no difference. So then we started, oh boy, what are we gonna do now? we basically don't have a book. And so we started talking through different ideas and so forth. And he gave us a couple of different ideas in terms of what would it look like if you interviewed a bunch of individuals, a number of individuals who had different experiences from high school, college to their professional careers, and translated those experiences into the content that you have in the book today. We're like, that's an interesting topic, concept. So we said, okay, let's try that out. And so we actually went through the whole process of, we identified 11 individuals, and went through interviews with them, asking them about how they broke into the industry, what was their high school experience like, their college experience like, how did they navigate their professional career to get them to where they are, what are some of the challenges, what were some of the benefits, what was their thought process. right? And then we translated that into three main concepts in the book that really would help. Because at this point now we were thinking we need to shape fast forward into one very simple and unique vision, which is how do we help college students and young professionals accelerate their careers? So as simple as that. So that whole interview process really took us about a year and a half to do, because we had to interview a bunch of people, document that interview, get signatures from them on this is the only piece of content we will be using in the book, get sign off on that, write the book, go back to all 11 interviewees, and have them sign off on that as well. And then we went through our own internal kind of approval process for the content of the book, and editing and rereading, editing and rereading, and editing and rereading, and so forth, right? So that, and once we got that, that's when we knew we had a book, and that's when we knew writing a book is not the easiest thing to do in the world. But we went through it, and we got through it as long as it took, but we got through it at the end of the day, right? And we did have, I mean, we were friends, and we started this together, and we did have some riffraff, right? Disagreed on some concepts, but at the end, back to what I said earlier, it really, and this was me from iStandAbove into this, was we were really able to define like, hey, this is a business, and we're going to disagree on stuff, but at the end of the day, we're friends, right? And so this allowed us to challenge each other, to make sure that what we're putting on paper, we literally were editing each and every line and debating on what is the best, and what's the purpose of that line in this book, and is that going through, right? And is that relating to the reader as well? And so as we went through that process, that's when we started thinking about, well, it could be much broader than just a book, right? So our whole goal now was, how do we help young professionals accelerate their careers, or college students accelerate their careers? And so now we started thinking of, it's not just through reading a book. So the book kind of serves as the playbook, right? But different people learn in different ways. You have people that learn through reading, you have people that learn through watching different things, and then you have people that learn through experiencing stuff. So we said, the book is just one aspect now. How can we expand on what we're doing into something greater? And that's when we started to say, okay, let's interview short interviews of different people in different industries, and just ask them how they broke into the industry. And those would be tips and tricks that young professionals, college students can take and apply it to where they are now, to help them into getting into that industry that they want. Then what brought it all together for us was an event called the X event, which was an event that we brought together to join college students, college administrators, government officials, and business leaders all together in one room to talk about the concept of accelerating one's career, and different actions that each one of those stakeholders can play to be able to achieve that. Because whether you're a college student, whether you're a business leader, whether you're a government official, everyone has a role to play in the educational system. And everyone has a role to play in helping college students accelerate their careers. That's what we honed in on, and that's what brought it all together for folks. So we ended up doing a couple of X events. The first one was about 150 students that we got into the room. The next one doubled into about 300 students that got into the room, and it was a very fulfilling experience, being to bring that concept, something that was different, that hadn't been done. And at the time I was in Boston, hadn't been done in the Boston area, before. And, it was really something that we had, like, it was different from time to time. We had a blend of And we always describe it as think of a concept and think of a leadership conference. Blend that together, and what does that look like?
Yeah, yeah.
We had a bunch of short to the point talks. We had panel discussions. We had performances by musicians, and it was a really fun experience. And that's what we wanted, was to make it a fun experience. We wanted to make education fun for the students and something that they can look back and say, hey, I can do whatever I want to if I set my mind to it. And I can have fun at the same time doing it,
Yeah.
right? Because we always had this notion of when you're back in college and you fair, you think, oh, okay, I have to print my resume, I have to get my mindset ready for, you know, having my 60-second pitch ready. I have to make sure I'm remembered, and that could be a very grueling and taxing experience, right, on your mind. But we wanted it to be fun, where you can meet business leaders, you can interact with them, you can build relationships, and you can bob and weave to a tune or two at the same time. And so that's what it fast forward ended up being, was a collective a collection of experiences through the book, through the interviews that we did, and then ultimately through the experience event that we did in order to help students accelerate their careers.
What was the hardest part of setting up an event like that? There's the student aspect, there's the speaker aspect, there's the logistic aspect of chairs and all that.
Honestly, the hard part, oof, there's so many. The hardest part was definitely the logistics behind it, because there were so many different things, because it was about a 3 hour, 2 to 3 hour event. But within the 2 to 3 hours, there were so many different parts, and we needed to make sure one was ready for each of their individual parts, right? And so the logistics behind it was grueling. And this goes back to having the support system, um, because our families were supportive, our friends were supportive, um, our now wives were very supportive, and everyone was kind of helping us. Like, even if we had to box, we had packages for the students and all that stuff. There were nights that we stayed up, through the night, through the evening, into the next morning, putting together stuff. We had support from business leaders that we built connections with, that were helping out as well. So, and we had, friends and family that volunteered to help us on the day. So it wasn't just the two of us. It ended up being a production crew, pretty
Yeah.
much, um, of 15 plus people that were helping. And I mean, like, a production where we had like lights, cameras, and all the good stuff. And so I think the logistics part was pretty much what was the hardest part. Because once we got the students, the schools, the business leaders, once we told them about the concept, everyone was very excited about the concept, very intrigued about the concept as well, to
Yeah.
find out more. Um, but it was logistically together, it was the hardest part.
And that led you to Sport Up.
And that led me to SportUp, right? And so with SportUp is an advisory firm that really helps professional athletes transition to life after sports. And this is not more so. This is not so more so like life, more along the lines of tactically, as an athlete, how do you transition? Because you're basically reinventing your career. How do you tactically transition from being an athlete to being an athlete in another field, right? Because you're really reinventing your career. So, and what made me kind of think about the concept of SportUp was my different experiences that I've had in the past, right? And so it started out, and for me, SportUp is what brings it all together for me, because I started with iStandAbove, with leadership development for high school and college students. I went into my tryouts with my football tryouts. right? And then it went to fast forward, which was, really helping college students and young professionals accelerate their careers, whether it's entrepreneurship or whether it's in the corporate world. Now, education and sports were really something that the two things that that I am very passionate about was what brought it all together for me. So now I was thinking, how can I bring all those experiences together into one service offering that creates an impact in the community? And I just kind of thought back into, for SportUp, you have athletes and you can take football, for instance, you have a short lifespan. You go through, maybe you become a superstar, you play for, 10, 12 years, but that's 10, 12 years, and then you're in your mid 30s, and then what happens next? Or what the common path is you play for maybe 2 to 5 years, and then you're still in your 20s, and then what happens next, right? And so, and then I had heard a lot of stories through just interactions with different athletes about, what goes on as you're going through your professional career as an athlete. You really need to be also empowered to take ownership of your career after sports. So I really kind of took a lens of, there are really four ways you can really transition, career wise, that is, at least to start. Is one, you decide to go the corporate route, right? And so you play for a couple of years, realize, you need to go down a different path, and then you go the corporate route, right? Second is you go an entrepreneurship route, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a for-profit business, um, and really start your own business, life after sports. Athletes today are playing and they have their own business as well. The other route is, you become an investor in different businesses. And that's where you make your living off of, is investing in different businesses that you may or may not be passionate about, but you can see there's a return on your investment coming. And then the fourth route is, how can you turn your personal brand into different partnerships with different products, different services, and make an income off of that as well. And so part of what SportUp is trying to do is really empower the athletes to be able to make intentional decisions based on what they want to do and not what people around them are telling them to do. So as an athlete, you may have your financial advisors, you may have friends and family, which is all great, and you need to have that support system. But then also, what would the world look like as well if each athlete was knowledgeable about different investments, different activities that they were involved in, and they can make their own decisions based on the experience that they have, knowing the foundation know for any one of these avenues. And that's what SportUp tries to do, is how do we empower the athletes out there to be able to make their own decisions, of course having the support, but they can make their own decisions on, what life after sports looks like for them, and be able to go into different industries they're passionate about, not because they heard from someone that this may be lucrative or this may be the path, but they're making their own intentional decisions, just like we did with Fast Forward, just like we did with iStandAbove. You can do anything if you set your mind to it. Now, athletes, you can do anything that you set your mind to, just knowing that you can build the foundation that you need to make it happen, after you're done playing.
Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned you're married. Like, how have you been managing working full time, running this firm, and giving, her time? Is that something, before you got married, you like let her know, like, listen, I'm going to, I'm passionate about, these entrepreneurial endeavors and things like, I mean, how have you managed that aspect?
So I'm glad you asked that, because I was looking for an in to give a shout out to my wife, because she's been my number one supporter, to be honest.
Yeah.
And Um, so she knew. So I was doing all these things before we met. And actually, when we met, I was transitioning from football tryouts into fast forward. So I was in between when we met. However, through conversations early on, we began to have conversations, and she was no stranger to hard work herself. I mean, she was also doing different things and challenging things on as well. So she knew the amount of effort it took, and she also saw in me, like, if I have my mind set to something, I'm going at. I did. What I did with her was actually inspired me to do this. Was she also was involved in everything that I was doing as well, right? And so it was a team effort. I would say, right? And so to SportUp, like, she was right there with us, along with Tucker's wife as well. They were both right there with us. Um, in the interviews we were doing, the planning of the events, they were probably our production managers, if you will, for the events. Um, they as I was starting SportUp, she she was right there with me, talking through the idea. She still is talking through the ideas with me. So it's a team effort. And so being able to be open on the communication part of things, in terms of, this is what we're doing, and this is about it. There was an understanding between the two of us. And also, you just need to make, right. It comes down to time management. And so we have our times where there's no work. It's just focused on us. And we're just enjoying each other's company, right? But the communication piece is very key, because it gives her insight into what's going on in my mind, and what I need to be focused on, and then also on her end, right? It gives me insight into what's going on in her mind and what she's focused on, and we just play, the supporting cast, at any given time, whether I need supporting cast there, or if she needs to be the supporting cast on my end. We take turns in doing that. But I would say involving her in my endeavors was probably the greatest thing I could have done, in that aspect, because it insight into the nitty gritty of what needs to be done to make it happen. And she was also influential in what the output was, because she was always also, a lot of the great ideas came from her, came from Tucker's wife, or with iStandAbove, came from Peter and Halim's wife, and so forth.
Yeah. You know, we covered a good amount in this. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't?
Um, I don't think so. I think the biggest thing, and I think my biggest piece of advice, that I have, is, there are a lot of different things that everyone can do in this world, and it's up to you to figure out how much of it you want to do. But then I wouldn't also go into a situation where you think you're alone in anything, because whether you co-found something, or whether you start something with someone else, or you do it by yourself, you shouldn't necessarily be fearful of asking for help, because there are always going to be people around that are willing to help, and that are willing to help you get to the next level. And then the second thing I would say is, never be afraid to start something, right? Even if you don't know anything about it, you can always start and evolve and learn and progress along the way. It's that starting point, right, that usually holds people back from even attempting something that could have been the greatest thing in the world, right? If you look at all the people that are doing great things today, they started from somewhere, and they started from something little, and built and built and built and built until they got to where they are. So that's something that I always hold my hat on, is start and evolve. But then also don't forget that your family and friends are there for you and around you to help keep you in the right frame of mind, and are also an extension of your team to help you get to the next level as well. Because that's one thing that has been great for me, is having a great family and a great set of friends around me, and friends that I actually, they all know that I call family. So I just say friends and family for the public, but just having a great family around you, to help you, to help you progress.
Yeah. Uh, Pichon, thank you so much for being on. If people want to reach out to you, do you want to let them know how they can do that or follow you on your social media platforms or whatever?
No, for sure, for sure. No, thank you so much, for having me on today. It's been a tremendous opportunity to be able to share my story as well. I can be found on LinkedIn, or my social media on Instagram. It's Pichon.Duplan. And then SportUp also has its own Instagram as well. And up without the O, so SPRT, um, up. So and so always a pleasure. I can be found. Let me know if I can help in any way. But it's been a pleasure to this podcast, and hopefully, I can impact just one person through my story, and that's all it takes. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you having me on,
Well,
as
you've already
always.
done that. You've done that with me, so there's gonna be more coming. But
That's awesome. That's
yeah, yeah.
awesome. I appreciate that.
No, I just want to acknowledge you, man. It was really cool to see all the organizations you've found and built and doing just seeing the and then with the football, NFL and CFL tryouts and seeing the work ethic, you know, work having to work full time and doing all those things. It just you've got a great drive or great workout. I don't whatever it is. It's just it's great and a lot to learn from this. So thank you for being on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it.